Parliament unleashes its fury on Australia's secret police. Martin North, John Adams, in the interests of the people. Hello, John.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you going?
Well, it's been one hell of a week so far. We've had the interim report delivered by the ASIC inquiry. It's an interim report that I didn't expect. It came out of left field and it was absolutely scathing of ASIC. And now we face the situation, Martin, so we're recording a Wednesday evening in Australia, your Wednesday morning in the UK, and in a couple of days' time, so Friday afternoon at 2:00, ASIC will be before the inquiry for the first official public hearing for 90 minutes. And dare I say, I think there'll be some extreme fireworks.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting, hasn't it? Because this has been bubbling along, and I know that the Senate was getting quite frustrated at ASIC's lack of engagement, and they've basically written a whole report about it.
Absolutely. So while everyone has been scratching their head wondering what has happened with this ASIC inquiry and nothing will happen, well, what's been revealed in this report is that the inquiry is trying to get files on particularly investigations that have now concluded, because the inquiry wants to have some data, some evidence as to how does ASIC actually conduct investigations, the quality of what they do, and what were the outcomes. And in terms of ASIC, they have refused to hand over any material, claiming public interest immunity. And what we've seen now is the Parliament and the inquiry has said enough is enough. And the most extraordinary situation about this, Martin, is that this interim report that was handed down, 69 pages, it's a unanimous report. So the coalition, Greens and Labor, have all come together and said that the culture of secrecy at ASIC has to end, and ASIC has to participate in this inquiry properly, transparently, and they have to hand over the information. And the fact that it's a unanimous report, it has sort of sent quite surprising shockwaves, particularly with the media writing some massive national stories about this situation. And I mean, I don't think ASIC gets the story. If I can say this, Martin, ASIC doesn't respect this inquiry because it came from us. My report was the catalyst. Our shows were the motivation behind the Senate to get the inquiry up. We know from emails I've received from the Freedom of Information process that ASIC doesn't respect me or the work that I've done, even though Treasury said is quite substantially correct. And they have attempted to obfuscate and frustrate the Senate because one is that they have no excuses for their performance, and two, because it came from a Wollongong bogan, they just think this entire process is completely illegitimate and not worth their time.
Yeah, well, we've said all the way along that ASIC was more worried about their own reputation and, not wanting to confront the issues. And once again, we see the same thing, that clearly serious questions being thrown at ASIC by the Senate are being disregarded, and, they show no respect to the Senate. As they show no respect to you and your analysis, which, as you say, was the catalyst. So it goes to form, doesn't it?
Yes. And the one thing I'll say, Martin, is that, so, I mean, the title is slightly tongue-in-cheek when we refer to Australia's secret police. Usually we think about the secret police to be the intelligence services, but the way ASIC is behaving, in some regards, they're more secretive than parts of the national security apparatus, which have legitimate reasons to actually be secret.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And of course, ASIC has a really critical role in terms of the effectiveness of the financial system in Australia, and both from a corporate perspective around companies and also investors, and many other roles too. So the fact that there is a huge spotlight being shone on ASIC and its inability to do the things that it must do and should do, really casts a broader question about the health and status of the financial system in Australia too.
Yes, and I think particularly for the chair of ASIC, Chairman Longo, I think this is the beginning of the end for his tenureship, because he's played the politics poorly. He has a very poor relationship with the Senate. He's done nothing to build political capital. He's done nothing to build confidence in how he's running ASIC, and the fact that there's a unanimous report slamming him and his behaviour, that says quite a lot. And so, Martin, what I want to do is to just quickly go through a few slides so we can actually give the audience a bit of a sample as to what came out in the last 24 hours. So if we look at slide 1, Martin, here's a press release that Senator Bragg issued only yesterday on Tuesday, Australian time. And it says, quote, ASIC is trying to frustrate the Senate's role to investigate porous law enforcement in Australia. This particular report is designed to end the secrecy and obfuscation to which ASIC is addicted. The committee has unanimously agreed to reject ASIC's public interest immunity claims over closed cases. Furthermore, the committee has rejected ASIC's secrecy over its communications with the executive government regarding these public interest immunity claims. The report also sets out concerns on ASIC's interference in the parliamentary process. A referral to the Privileges Committee will be made on this matter. Now, Martin, on the latter point this is a issue that we covered back in November, which is what happened on the 27th of October, 2022. So the day that the inquiry was established in the Australian Senate, 43-20, we know that ASIC had attempted to unduly influence senators or their staff to vote against the inquiry. And so Senator Bragg has attempted on multiple occasions to get his hands on those communications, that he wants to know, who did ASIC communicate with? What did they say? What were the instructions given? And we know that ASIC privately talk about planting Dorothy Dixes within Parliament. So if there was any type of collusion to obstruct the establishment of inquiry, Bragg wants to know. And so ASIC refuses to tell him anything or tell the inquiry anything. So he's basically saying he's going to send it to the Privileges Committee for a potential contempt of Parliament, which is an extraordinary serious step that could lead to a disastrous outcome for Chairman Longo if he doesn't play his cards properly. So we did a show called Deep State Banana Republic Corruption, and that's what that situation was. And that issue is going to be pursued in the next few months going forward, because this has been an issue for 8 months of back and forth communication between the inquiry and ASIC as to what happened that day. And so far, there's nothing. Now, the one thing I can reveal, Martin, is that I do have a pending Freedom of Information request where I focus on 3 days in October, actually technically 4 days, from the 25th to the 28th of October. And I've listed about 15 ASIC employees, including the chairman. And I said, I want to know what they said about the inquiry. So legally, they have to provide me these records. They were supposed to provide them to me this week, but they've asked for a 2-week extension pending. They need additional time to search for more records. And there was a few other things that I've asked for separate to the inquiry. And so I think by the 7th of July, we're going to have a whole host of emails as to what actually happened that week. And we'll see if we can figure out who is the secret mole inside Parliament that was attempting to assist ASIC escape the Adams inquiry.
Yeah, well, you have to suspect that there's a lot of stuff going on below the waterline, not least because, of course, the way that the two inquiries bubbled up and the fact that Labor didn't seem particularly keen at one stage to engage around this, although I noticed, as you said, that it was on the same side of that interim report as everybody else. So I think there are some important questions here about who did what when, and who acted in good faith and who didn't act in good faith.
Precisely. Now, the other point about this quote is that these public interest immunity claims is basically ASIC arguing that releasing information about closed cases, investigations that have finished and there's no ongoing legal work, that releasing that information to Parliament is contrary to the public interest. So the key thing that's come out of this process is that 11 out of the 13 public interest immunity claims have been unanimously rejected by the inquiry, and basically the recommendations in this interim report is that ASIC has up until I think about the 18th or 19th of July to hand over the records to the inquiry, and if they don't, then basically the minister representing the treasurer will have to come to the Senate on the 2nd of August and explain why does ASIC continue to operate in secret, and why can't the Parliament see here's the thing about Parliament, Martin, is that not everything in Parliament has to be public. The Parliament, particularly inquiries, have the ability to take evidence in secret, what they call in-camera evidence, and obviously if things are taken in camera, it's actually a criminal offence to leak information given to Parliament in secret, and so there are ways to keep things confidential if things are of such a sensitive nature, even though these are historical closed cases. But the committee needs to know how does ASIC actually investigate cases to figure out whether they're actually doing a good job or not. And so using these public interest immunity claims, it appears to be a specific legal tactic to hide a whole bunch of stuff that ASIC doesn't want Parliament to see, and by ASIC doing this, they're obviously frustrating the inquiry's work, and they're stopping the Parliament's role of holding ASIC accountable.
Yes, and I think it's probably worth just highlighting that the Labour Finance Minister seems particularly unwilling to prod ASIC at all.
Well, yes. I mean, look, we have a juicy piece of information that's come across my desk in the last 24 hours. A journalist had a discussion with the Minister for Financial Services, Stephen Jones, in Parliament about ASIC, and apparently the minister said that he has, quote, no beef with ASIC. And I'm thinking to myself, so hang on. So we have a law enforcement agency with a declining performance over at least 11 years plus, scores of financial victims at the hands of either ASIC not doing its job or dropping a nuclear bomb on the wrong target. And the Minister for Financial Services has no issue with ASIC or its performance. It is just stunning. Now, I have my theories as to why Stephen Jones is behaving the way he does, and it could well be somehow related to some of the more salacious programs we've done on this channel, Martin. But dare I say, I think there's more to come on this non-transparent relationship between the Albanese government and ASIC, and whether there is something more sinister operating behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, there certainly are question marks whizzing around the place. So watch for this with interest, I think.
Yes. Now, because of this report, and because of the Senator Bragg being very aggressive, both in his press release, but also actually in the Senate chamber, we had a couple of prominent articles that both actually gave me credit for establishing the inquiry. So it's good to see that the media is finally recognizing our good work, Martin. So if we go on to slide 2, we'll just do this very quickly. We have an article by Patrick Durkin in the Financial Review, ASIC addicted to secrecy, parliamentary committee claims. So that's obviously, a pretty big headline. And then we look at the Australian, the next slide. Parliamentary committee hits out at ASIC over immunity claims. And so, I mean, with a number of these journalists, Martin, I'm in regular contact with them. And as we get close to Friday at 2:00, a number of journalists around the country will be tuning in live to see what sort of fireworks there will be, because ASIC was supposed to appear a few weeks ago with Senate estimates, and because of a scheduling error, they actually didn't appear. So this is going to be the first time ASIC is before a parliamentary committee since February. And obviously, a lot's happened with the publishing of, more than 160 submissions. But not only that, we've had a number of big financial scandals explode in the media. 60 Minutes covered one of them about Shaw and Partners, and then we had Michael West Media cover a big scandal that about a court case that is still live, including a guy called Jeff Shannon, and then we had Spotlight, where you had a guy called Ken Gamble go up to Malaysia and crack down on an international crime syndicate that was ripping $4 million of money using scams into Australia. And that program slammed ASIC for its failure to tackle transnational crime. So there's been a lot of things been happening, which is adverse to ASIC's prestige and image. At the same time, now we've had this absolute bombshell of an interim report slamming ASIC. And so we're going to have ASIC Chair Longo before the committee on Friday with his entourage, with a very angry Senator Bragg, and all I can say is get the popcorn out. It should be a good show.
Yes, I should be watching with interest, and Mr. Bragg has done a good job at nailing some very important issues, and some of the tweets he's put out really do underscore just how serious this whole situation is. And of course, it's now to the point where they can't just turn their back on it and say, "Oh, everything's fine." This is going to only go one way, isn't it? There has to be substantive change in and around ASIC if there's going to be any credibility in this at the end of the day.
Well, yeah. I mean, the fact that the Treasury has come out and said that my report is substantially correct. I mean, the debate's over. There is systemic decline in ASIC's operational performance. I mean that's beyond dispute. Treasury has privately confirmed that. My report says that the numbers are the numbers, and obviously in ASIC's submission to the inquiry, they couldn't explain why their performance has gone downhill, even though they've had more money and more staff. So their position, their political position, is completely screwed. And as we go forward into the second half of this year, and you're going to see multiple people testify about how bad ASIC is. I think the political pressure is going to get so hot that Stephen Jones and Jim Chalmers will have to finally come to the table and basically realize that they've got a massive political problem on their hands that they actually inherited from the coalition, and they can't hide behind the fact that everything appears to be okay. They will have to take some very urgent action sooner rather than later. And so one thing I can reveal, Martin, is that in the last fortnight, I have sent a couple of letters to both the Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services. And I said, it's a mistake for you to think that you can wait 12 months until this inquiry delivers its final report, because there are victims going through massive ordeals at the moment. And so the government needs to really get on with the job of trying to fix ASIC ASAP. And so I haven't received a response to my letters, but we'll obviously see what happens. Now, Martin, as we bring this show to a close, I just wanted to highlight a couple of paragraphs from the interim report that I thought really spoke to, I guess, how precarious this situation is for ASIC, and whether they actually fully understand how poorly they are being seen now by both the Parliament, but also in terms of the public. So if we go on to the next slide, this is paragraph 1.7 from the report. It says, quote, "The committee is concerned by ASIC's behaviour in relation to the commencement of this inquiry. Rather than engaging with the community in a transparent and accountable manner, from the outset, ASIC has chosen to attempt to undermine and influence the process of the inquiry before evidence had been gathered or hearings held." Martin, I mean, you've participated in numerous parliamentary inquiries over the last decade. I've engaged in a number of myself. I don't think I've seen that type of statement by a parliamentary inquiry, basically saying that a government department or a witness is actually refusing to participate properly with the parliamentary process. Have you ever seen anything like this in the last decade?
No, John, I haven't. And, there are clearly two levels at which things are operating. There is the political level, which is, the normal course of events, but then there is the strategic process level. And here what we're seeing is that at the process level, the Senate is saying they're not cooperating, they're not doing what they need to do, they're not taking us seriously. And so this is more than just political posturing. This is actually much more substantive in terms of the interaction between the Senate and ASIC in particular. And I don't think I've ever seen anything so obviously off key between those two entities. I mean, I suppose you could say that the Financial Services Royal Commission did a bit of it, but only a bit of it. But this is way more in depth. And of course, it's worth just underscoring, this is an interim report. This isn't the final findings. This is their frustration on the way through the process.
Yes. This interim report, I'm glad you mentioned this, Martin. This interim report doesn't actually speak to any of the scathing submissions that have been submitted and like that have slammed ASIC's performance. All this interim report is documenting is how there's been over 100 requests for information, and ASIC has frustrated the process all the way for the last 8 months. And the entire committee of 6 senators are basically fed up with in terms of ASIC's attitude, and they're basically saying it's time for Australia's financial police force to basically stop the games and actually get on with the job of being held accountable by Parliament and actually helping the Parliament determine whether ASIC is actually a fit for purpose organisation. So now, if we just go on to the last slide, Martin, is that here's a couple of other paragraphs that I thought were also powerful. So quote. So this comes from paragraph 112. The committee has formed a view that ASIC's refusal to provide this information is obstructing the committee's ability to conduct this inquiry. As such, the committee has taken the significant action of making recommendations that the Senate order the provision of the information sought. The committee expects that ASIC take this as an opportunity to reflect on its conduct to date and to reassess how it will better engage with the committee's inquiry in an open and transparent manner moving forward. That is I mean that's basically saying, Martin, that ASIC is operating unprofessionally, unethically, potentially bordering on corruption, and all of this is dropped only a couple of days before ASIC is before the inquiry on Friday, and it's only 90 minutes, so it could well be that we're going to see a massive confrontation between ASIC's position, and then obviously the frustration of in terms of some of these senators. But look, I know there's a lot of our viewers who say nothing will happen, and people are very frustrated. One thing I can reveal, Martin, is that in the last month, when I did meet Senator Bragg in his office in Sydney, I said to him at the end of our discussion, I said, "There's a lot of people who are skeptical that this process is going to move the needle, because there's been so many attempts in the last 15 years to try to fix ASIC, and every time there's been an attempt to change, whether it's the Royal Commission reviews or inquiries, the same set of people tend to survive, and ASIC's culture doesn't shift." And so Senator Bragg said to me that he understands that this is the challenge. Can we actually move the needle this time? And can we actually try to fix the performance of ASIC? And so so hopefully in the next 6 months, I'll get an opportunity to testify. My position is that it's not a matter of the number of staff or the amount of money or even the structure of ASIC. It is the culture and the leadership. It is absolutely broken at the top, and it has to be a wholesale change. And so the Chairman Longo has proven himself to be completely inept at doing the job of chair of ASIC, particularly when it comes to managing his most important relationship, which is the Parliament. And my view is he has to go. Most of the commission has to go. Most of the senior leadership has to go. And we need to get actually competent people who are going to take active steps to change ASIC's approach and culture so that we start to see a completely new paradigm in terms of financial law enforcement in terms of this country. So in conclusion, Martin, a disastrous week for ASIC. The parliament is pissed off. It's only going to go downhill from here in terms of ASIC. And then the question will be is, will Labor finally get the message that this is going to become too big of a political problem for them to absorb, or will they seek to continue to protect ASIC because there is something secretive happening behind the scenes that we just don't know about? I mean, that's obviously the big question. At some point, the Treasury in the midst of financial services, they're going to realize that they've got a big problem on their hand, and they'll be forced to make, assuming they want to actually ensure that this political problem gets fixed, they'll have to make some big decisions, and whether that's talking to Longo saying you've got to go, or whether it's something else, we'll have to see. But while it's a slow process, I think we're going to move into a phase of adding more and more pressure in the next 6 months, and something's going to break. And given that you and I have a steely resolve, I don't think it's going to be us.
No, I think it's fair to say that we will continue pedal to the metal. But I'd also make the final point on this one, John. We're looking specifically at ASIC and the way that ASIC does its job and the way it interacts with Parliament. My question is ASIC just a standalone, standout problem, or does this also speak more broadly to the way that politics and economics and policy is done in Australia? My theory is that we are seeing here just the tip of an iceberg, and I suspect that some of the same behaviours and some of the same contradictions that we're seeing at the moment are very much resident elsewhere. So we need to cast a very broad spotlight, I think, as this goes forward, John.
Yes. I mean, look, the only thing I'll say to that, Martin, is to some degree that I would agree with your proposition that some of these issues are more broadly beyond ASIC. But at the same time, the number of previous attempts to fix ASIC, but also now this interim report with this language, which you, by your own admission, have said you haven't seen this in the last decade. Perhaps ASIC is the worst apple in terms of a bad bunch, but we have to ensure that this worst of the worst apple is somehow corrected.
Absolutely. Well, good on you, John, for continuing with this pursuit, and congratulations on the coverage as a result of it. And I'll look forward to the next conversation, and we'll continue pushing really hard in the interest of the people.
Absolutely, Martin.
Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. We'll see you next time.